We're about to begin the services. Mrs. Rachell, Leah, Eisenberg. Officiating is Rabbi Jeffrey Weil from Ezra Habanim, the Niles Township Jewish Congregation in Skokie.
Adonai, ma adam v'teda ehu, ben enosh v'tichashvehu. Adam lehevel dama, damav ketzel over, baboki atzitz v'chalaf, la'erev imalel v'yavesh. Tashev enosh adaka v'tomer shuvu v'nei adam. These are the words of the psalmist saying, Adonai, eternal God, what are we that you have regard for us, and what are we that you would even be mindful of us? We are all of us just a breath. Our days are a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up and is renewed, and in the evening it fades and withers. But God, you cause all of us to return unto dust, saying, Shuvu b'nei Adam, return, O mortal ones. Would that we were wise, and would that we understood whither we go from here. For when we die, we carry nothing with us, not our riches, not our glory. But God, you say, Shmor tam urei yashar. Mark the wholehearted, behold the upright. Those are the ones who shall find shalom, who shall find peace. Friends, we gather this afternoon to say farewell to one who was wholehearted, and she was upright, and she was strong, and she was extraordinary. Rachell Eisenberg. We have something, our scriptures have something for every moment of our lives, for the joyful times and for the sad times as well. You'll find the 23rd Psalm, which is something that we often say at these times, in our handouts. I will read it in Hebrew, and then we could read it together in English. It's in the inside of the handouts. Adonai ro'i lo echsar, bino desha yarbitzeni, almei minochoti nahaleni nafshia shovev, yancheni v'ma'aglei tzedek lema'an shemo. Gamki elech beged salmavet, lo irara, ki ata imadi. Shivtecha mishantecha, hema yinachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai, shulchan neged sorai, yishanta v'ashemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yurtafuni kol yimei chaya, v'shafti beveit Adonai, l'orach yamim. We read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We talk about the Eshet Chayil, right? The woman of valor, and I think that's often a misunderstood passage from Proverbs. What is the woman of valor? What does it actually mean? Some people say it's antiquated or whatever. Someone who's a chayil is someone who has fortitude, really. The Eshet Chayil is a woman of fortitude. I think it's a better translation than valor. And Rachell Eisenberg was one with tremendous fortitude. She's one who others depended on, and who had this strength, this extraordinary strength, and these opinions as well, and just this power that I think both sustained people, maybe challenged people at times. But she was indeed an Eshet Chayil, and it begins Eshet Chayil mi yimtza, woman of valor. Who can find her? It sort of begins on a cynical note. It's like searching for the heart of gold and getting old while you're searching because you feel like you're never going to find it. Eshet Chayil mi yimtza. Who would find such a person? But you all, or we all did, the Eshet Chayil. a woman of valor, a woman of fortitude, who can find? She is more precious than fine pearls. Her husband trusts in her. He lacks nothing. She does him good, never harm. She perceives, which is really true, she perceives that her labor is rewarding, and labor she did, Rachell did. Her candle burns on into the night. She reaches out to those in need, extends her hand to the poor. She is clothed in strength and dignity, and faces the future cheerfully. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her lips. It's true too. Her children rise up and bless her. Her husband sings her praises. There's a passage that's not in this particular translation that talks about her creating things for the household, sewing and that sort of things as well, which she did, of course, as well. She worked and was productive in so many ways. Rabot banot asu chayil. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you excel them all. The third chapter of Kohelet, which is Ecclesiastes, is familiar to us, and it expresses this idea that the world is unfolding as it should. And again, just like the Kriya blessing that Ruth and Ron just recited for the blessing for the tearing of the ribbon, acknowledges God as the true judge, the judge of truth. This passage also expresses something that at times is hard to believe, that things are actually happening in life the way they ought to. And frankly, given what Rachell experienced and what Izzy experienced and what so many of her people experienced and what so many people experience, sometimes you doubt that. And yet the passage remains inspiring nonetheless. La kol zman, ve'et locho chefetz tachat hashamayim. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot that which is planted. A time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time for silence and a time to speak. So we speak. Words in memory and tribute of Rachell Eisenberg. Early and late in life, she was strong and she was passionately devoted to her people. And I'm actually now referring to Miriam being Moses and Aaron's sister. As a girl, Miriam convinced her parents to have another child, according to the Midrash, and that child would end up being Moses, God's agent of redemption. Later in life, Miriam led the women in song for their survival with exultation after passing through the sea from narrow and dark Egypt into the wide expanses of freedom in the Midbar, in the wilderness. And most impressively, by her merit, by Miriam's merit, or for her merit, she sustained the Israelites during their decades of wandering through the Be'er Miriam, the Miriam's well, which according to our tradition followed the people as they wandered. They drank from it. And in this week's Torah portion, the one that we read throughout this week and we'll read on Shabbat on Saturday, Miriam dies and the Israelites mourn her. And now we return to the spot to mourn the death of Rachell Eisenberg. Her Hebrew name, Rachel Leah, evokes two other strong women of Torah, but her strength, her determination, I think best resembles Miriam, which was her mother's name, of course. Rachell was strong-willed, like Miriam. She helped her people. She guided them through a horribly dark time. And by her merits, hers and her Izzy's, the family grew, the people grew and thrived and was nourished in every way. She was born to Yechiel and Miriam. Rachell was younger sister to Moshe, Irene, Shlomo, Zichronam Livracha, all of their memories for blessing, and also older sister to Goldie. Theirs was a prominent family in the town of Ozentin in Poland, a small town. They enjoyed a luxury that few other families enjoyed. a telephone. Rachell always remembered her phone number. You know how we remember our numbers from when we were kids? So she always remembered that phone number. It literally was a phone number. The number was 7. That was their phone number. That's how few people own phones. The family contended, of course, with increasing restrictions throughout the 30s. One of her uncles was a member of the Jewish Council of the town Byzantin. He might not have been as compliant or forthcoming as the authorities wanted, and he was sent to Auschwitz and killed. The Jews of Byzantin were confined at a certain point to an open ghetto. Rachell was kicked out of school at 9 years old. Yechiel, the father, at risk of being taken himself, constructed a false room in the barn, was it? The kids didn't even know where he was, which was wise that they would not know, but he was in the barn in this false room long periods of time, months at a time. He had a radio to help him understand what was happening out there in the ever-darkening world. At a certain point, most of the Jews were rounded up and transported to Treblinka. Rachell's family, though, was somehow able to find a way to get to a forced labor camp, and there they stayed for a while. In 1944, though, Rachell and members of her family were taken to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Her father and her brothers perished there. And Rachell, she was not the oldest, as I mentioned, but in a way, she was a middle child, but in a way she was like the oldest. The family acknowledges that she was instrumental in helping her mother and sisters stay alive at least for as long as they did. Her mother, Miriam, died after liberation at Bergen-Belsen, which would come a little bit later. Because as the Russians were nearing Auschwitz, it was late 1944, winter of 1944, and early 45. Rachell was part of the death march from Auschwitz to Bergen-Belsen, I guess with her sisters and her mom. And it's amazing that they made it through the death march, and many died along the way. Many thousands died on the march, and then many thousands more died in Bergen-Belsen of typhus and from other causes, and it was only for a few months between the time they arrived and liberation by the British. Among those who died during that time was Anne Frank, by the way, who was Rachell's age and would have turned 92 yesterday. Rachell was she 16 or 16 when the British came? 15. Almost 16, thank you. When the British came in and liberated the prisoners, the emaciated, sickly, and Bergen-Belsen was basically disinfected and became a DP camp where Rachell remained with her surviving family for a few years. But as I mentioned, her mom died shortly after liberation, as many did. Their bodies were just not able to handle the food that they were given, the rich food that they were given. But ever dynamic, even during those dark times, and really extraordinary, and wanting to make up for having been exiled from formal education about 10 years earlier at that point. Rachell had finished high school at Bergen-Belsen, and then she left her sisters, which might have been hard for her, might have been hard for them. She left them at the DP camp and went to Munich to study, University of Munich. And she studied pharmacy, and she made friends, lifelong friends. The family later reunited, was able to leave Europe, thank God, and they settled in the Bronx with her uncle. Rachell was 20 years old, I believe, at this point, and she was working as a lab technician. And one day she met a man who had had a similar trajectory. This is a man named Izzy Eisenberg. He had grown up in a somewhat larger town, I believe not far from Byzantin. He had been in Auschwitz too, and he actually had settled in Chicago here, but he went to New York to find a good match, because that's what people do, Jewish people. And Rachell and Izzy met, and they matched, and they married, and they honeymooned in Lakewood, New Jersey, which I was really pleased to hear that from Ron just a couple days ago. I know Lakewood, New Jersey very well. My grandparents had a liquor store there. I grew up nearby. And there's a picture of your parents, you told me, on the lake, right, in a rowboat, is it? I know that lake. And I'd actually love to see that picture sometime. They moved back to Chicago, and that is where they remained, settling in Evanston, raising Ruth and Ron. Izzy had learned carpentry, and Rachell, again, always dynamic, always seeking to kind of improve things for the family and for herself, and knowing what she wanted for the family, knowing what was best for the family, encouraged her husband to launch his own contracting business. It was a wise move, for Izzy's homes were popular with friends and people from Mikdash El and others. Izzy was, and I remember this from 9 years ago, and it's hard to believe it's been 9 years actually, but when we were here last, at least I was here with you last, Izzy was a decidedly unmaterialistic person. And Rachell, while certainly prudent, I'm sure, would on occasion take Ruth shopping for clothes. And as I mentioned before, Rachell loved making her own clothes. She'd get those, she had a Singer sewing machine in the basement. She'd get those patterns, right? You mentioned the crinkly paper, which you remember, that she'd have in the basement. But she would take Ruth shopping for clothes, and they'd come back, and Izzy would say something like, "What do you need this for?" Something along those lines.
What do you need this?
Yeah. Was that the right?
For what do you
For what do you need? For what do you need this for? Just for what you need. For what do you need this? Yeah.
You already have a pair of shoes.
You already have a pair of shoes. I also, by the way, remember you telling me that he would sometimes come home from work at a work site or something, and just he'd have his bubbly seltzer or something like that, and be on the floor with his seltzer. The little things in life. This is the life. Got it. But it was a rich life for the whole family. Very active in Mikdash El, in Evanston, which was one source of the rich social existence for the Eisenberg family. Also socializing with others. Rachell's friends from Germany, Izzy's friends from his hometown, and the families would get together at the Evanston beach for picnics and more. And Rachell, meanwhile, ever dynamic, returned to school yet again, to Roosevelt and to Spertus. She received a BA and 2 master's degrees, Jewish studies, of course, and special education as well. She studied hard. She'd work on her papers and studying and more while Ruth and Ron were in high school. And while Rachell was in school, at times Izzy would pick up the slack, coming home from work sites to make meals for the two of you as children, and to spend time with you. And Rachell was a student teacher at Evanston Township High School, much to Ron's discomforts. He said the other day, highly embarrassing. So, and there was a rule that they not interact if they would see each other in the hallway, which seems completely reasonable. Rachell also taught Hebrew at Lincolnwood Jewish Congregation and elsewhere, and she and they and the family was deeply devoted to the Jewish people and the Jewish state. She and Izzy visited Israel many times. They had friends and family there. They bought Israel bonds. They supported the Council for Jewish Elderly, the Jewish United Fund, and they were always reluctant to toss out mailed solicitations. We all get so many mailed solicitations, and Rachell would ask Izzy what to do with them, and he'd say, "Don't throw it out," and he was just very generous. Over the years, as time passed, Izzy was ailing, became sick, was unwell for quite a number of years, and through it all, Rachell summoned her vaunted strength, and she did have an abundance of it to care for her husband, devoted as she was. He lived as long as he did, thanks to Rachell's dogged attention to his care. And she was just as devoted to the growing family, and of course, by the way, not just as a mom, but as an aunt and a sister-in-law, and more, devoted to the growing family, but to her growing family as well. And she was very proud of how it grew and how it continues to grow from such darkness. It is amazing to me how such light and love can grow. It includes Letty and Judy, Nehemiah and Naomi, Anna and Matt and Albert, and the grandchildren, Ahuva, Yitzi, Tehila, Shlomi. And we wish Anna and Matt, we say B'Sha'at Tova, means may everything go well at a good time as you anticipate a new arrival for the family. I know that Rachell had some strong opinions. You all chuckled when I made reference to that before, and I'm sure that not everyone agreed with her opinions all the time. She was wise, though. Like many people, many wise people, they possess sometimes the biases, the perspectives of their own time, of their own era, but also the wisdom of the ages. And Rachell Eisenberg certainly had that. I caught a glimpse into her strong opinions at times as well. She would come to services pretty regularly, and she had her regular seat actually on the aisle in our big sanctuary. And after the funeral and the shiva, I visited a couple times at the house, and we talked about the books that she was reading, and she was a big reader. And I really enjoyed listening to her opinions about the synagogue. She always agreed with me, which I was very happy with. But she would say things like, if I told her something that they might be contemplating that she didn't agree with, she'd say, I think I remember her saying, they would be fools to do such a thing. So it's interesting. I called her Mrs. Eisenberg. I saw a note that I had written to her from those years ago. I didn't call her Rachell. I called her Mrs. Eisenberg. It felt like the right thing to do. But when she sent her thoughtful New Year's cards to me, she signed them affectionately Rachell. I was very touched by that. The wilderness for the Israelites was a painful and challenging time. We're reading about that in the book of Numbers now. The Israelites would often lose sight of the fact, the reality, at least within the context of the story, of God's providence, that God was providing for them. The Israelites simply could not get that into their heads. They could not accept it. And Moses would exhort them over and over and over again to be strong and resolute and faithful. But they could not get that message, that God was really there for them. During the Shoah, our people, like your parents, grandparents, had to be strong and resolute and to provide for themselves. And early and late in life, Rachell Eisenberg did that. She was always strong. She really was extraordinary. This is a very confusing life, and sometimes it is that confusion and the pain of life is in very sharp relief. It is impossible to control it. But people like Rachell and Izzy, they did understand that. And Rachell Eisenberg took control with the fortitude, that strength that she had, took control of situations, and she made it through, and she helped others through too. And she thrived, and she learned, and she taught, and she built, and she cared, and she loved. Zichrona livracha. May her memory be for blessing. Amen. Glad. Thank you. Ledahi Reshit Uvtirat Tachlit Achaim Kamasahem Kahalicha Kitzmicha Mishalav V'Shalav. Birth is a beginning, death a destination, life a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage. And the journey now, sadly, the journey of Rachell Leah Eisenberg has come to its conclusion. With Job who knew his share of suffering, Job cried out as we do, Adonai Natan, V'Adonai Lakach, Yehishim Adonai Mevarach. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken. Blessed be the name of the eternal God. And so, O God, into your care we entrust the spirit of Rachell Eisenberg. For you keep faith with your children in death as in life. O God, sustain us, please, that we may meet with serenity the mysteries that lie ahead for us, knowing that when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you, O God, will be with us as a loving friend in whom we put our trusts. You are the light of our lives and our hope in eternity. We now rise for the memorial prayer, El Mulei Rachamim. El Mulei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Amatzei Menucha Nechona, תחת כנפי השכינה, עם קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר רקיע מסירים, את נשמת רחל בת יחזקאל ומרים רבקה, שהלכה לעולמה. על הרחמים יסתירך, בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני כנחלתם, ותנוח בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר, Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence with the holy and the pure who glow like the light of the heavens to Rachell Eisenberg, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence and within the shadow of your wings. Let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And we say, Amen. You may be seated. Hatzor tamim palo kikol derchav mishpat. El emunah ve'en avel tzadik v'yasharhu. Hatzor tamim b'chol po'al. V'yomar lo matif al hashalit b'matav ma'al memit m'chaye. Rachell v'ya'al. Hatzor tamim b'chol ma'aseh v'yomar lo elav ma ta'aseh ha'omer v'oseh chesed chinam lanu ta'aseh. V'zchut hane'ekad keseh. Akshiva Aseh, Sadiq b'chol derachav, Atzur tamim erech apayim, umalei rachamim, chamal na v'chus na, al avot uvanim, ki lecha adon haslichot, v'harachamim, Sadiq atar Adonai hamid v'chayot, asher be'apiton kol ruchot, chalila lecha zichronenu limchot, v'hiyu na inecha, v'rachamim aleinu pikuchot, ki lecha adon harachamim v'haslichot. Adam in ben shana yihye, o elaf shanim yihye, ma yitron lo, v'lo haya yihye, baruch dayan ha'emet imit l'chayet, baruch hu ki emet dino, mishutet hakol de'ino, u mishalem ta'adam heshbona, v'dino hakol ishmo, v'daya yatinu, yadanu Adonai ki tzedek v'techa, Varecha, Shaptecha, Akin, Tahaper, Apar, Dan, Shaptecha, Tadiyata, Anad, Yashar, Ishpatecha. We place earth from the land of Israel into the grave of a Jew. It expresses the eternal Jewish hope in a better future for all humanity. This is from Har 18 from the Mount of Olives in Israel, in Jerusalem. Al Nukuman Tavo B'Shalom. May she come to her eternal home, B'Shalom, in peace. Amen. Amen. It is customary to put 3 measurefuls of earth into the grave of a Jew. We'll do that presently. After that, we will recite Kaddish, and then we'll do a Shorah, which is really forming 2 lines. Shorah is a row, and the mourning family will walk through the Shorah, and we will at that point offer traditional words of comfort and personal words of comfort to them as well as we leave the cemetery. But first we will put 3 measurefuls. It is customary for some to use the back of the shovel for all 3 or perhaps 1 of the measures of earth put into the grave, if you like, and also to put the shovel or the trowel, because there are buckets there, back into the pile for the next person as an affirmative act to pick it up to perform the mitzvah. So Ruth and Ron and family want to come up first. Others are welcome to come forward as well.
No, she couldn't travel. She's watching on the computer. And this is her granddaughter. And her daughter. Which one? Well, this is Vivian. That's her granddaughter. No, this is her daughter.
Say hi to Helen's Ellen.
I'm so sorry. I know your mommy so well. I'm so sorry. That's my daughter. That's my daughter. Should I go a little bit?
Yeah, it's all done.
Without the water, I hope you.
No, I'm gonna take your water, sweetheart.
No, I don't want to.
We're going to leave after we do that. So now
We
you're not,
leaving after.
yeah, you're not gonna walk there and walk
Okay,
back.
okay.
You want any more of this water? You want more water? Or should I-
No, I just wait till it gets there. I don't want to stay. There's a rubbish.
No, there
You
isn't.
take the water. I have to take water.
There is no place that way I'm leaving it. No, I'm just gonna leave it down this here. I am. Here, you know what? Here, and never mind. I'm gonna take your walker, go play with them, and I'm gonna turn this around. Here we go. I'm just glad that. Here, Mom. I'll get you in here.
Be in touch with me. You have my number. It's okay, go with that.
See, they cook. They're like they're right in there. Steven. I found my parents' grave. Yeah. I took a picture. In fact, I called him. I called the monument company. We have to, it is. There's dead, it's big. They just put that because we're waiting to put this thing. I called the company that did this, and they never called me back, so I actually called them on Friday. It's been weeks now, and they said they're busy because of his cousin goes to the Orthodox. My sister's daughter. One of she's got two daughters. Goldie. She looks like a woman. Yeah. So she was so there's lived in Lincolnshire. She went to school together. Like we ran into her during the summer
Not her opinion, even one.
Well, we're waiting if anyone didn't get a chance to sign the book this time before
They don't want to tell you anything.
Do you remember his allergy name?
Yeah. So you just
Remember Lucy?
Probably not. She's older than Leah.
She's 65. Lucy, she's a little older. Her kids went to high school with Ada.
Yeah, and they moved here.
Been in touch with them.
Maybe not sure. But yeah, she was so, I mean, he really kept her well. Very weird. Yeah. And then we could just meet with people and her husband and her mom. They bought a little house and the mom lives up in something.
How did you stay with you?
She was letting Judy's from here too. Judy and yeah, Judy's Ruth's an attorney. And letting her just go home. She's got right. No, it comes in. Outdoor weather. Not bad. I would like some people check blood. I need this get down. Do they have any left? Everything. Because I knew I didn't.
I'm not laughing.
In Florida. I was like, oh, let's do this again. On openings, you know,
Yeah, true. So you think you're gonna take this today?
I wrote it.
That's pretty much what we're
For
going.
5,000 whatever.
We're just gonna let it.
You don't want it to fail. And they have this.
Must they get more show?
Good. Well, everything looks like.
And the mirror was perfect.
Yeah.
I gave him a mirror. She took that one artwork from my house. I'm like, here, this is what I have available. Little walls in there. So thank you.
Who wants it? Oh, good.
Yeah. I probably looked up his parents live in Jersey. So I was sitting at until yeah, I was feeling so
I will do the Shirah. What's that? Okay. Were you? Yeah. Is that right? Oh, okay.
Copies of the cottage that are in the back.
Does everybody have Mordechai Kaddish who needs it? Okay. Whenever you're ready. Okay. Yit Gadal v'Yikadash Shemei Rabab. Be'alma divra chirute v'amlich machute. B'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala v'zman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabab mevarach le'olam ulamei amayam. Yitvarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal Shmei rihu. Eila mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran v'ama v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlam orab amin shmaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mrumav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Lech ki shalachacha Adonai, go your way, for God has called you. Lech Adonai ihiyeh imach, go your way, may God be with you. V'halach lefanayich tzidkayich, kavod Adonai ya'asvaich. May righteousness, your righteousness, go before you. May the glory of God receive you. We'd like to do the Shorah now, so if the mourning family can remain here, and the supporters of the mourning family can form two lines. Susan will show you, coming over here. Form two lines facing each other that the family will walk through.
So folks, everyone but the immediate family, we'll start over this way.
So the five of you like to come close and then walk slowly through. And please repeat after me as they walk through the Shura. May God console you with all who mourn in Zion and Jerusalem. Hamakom yefem etchem v'kosha avlei Tzion Yerushalayim. Now go forth in peace unto life. Thank you, everybody.
Family has requested memorial contributions to go to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., and that information is found on our website. And we also encourage all of you online to share your personal condolences and stories of Mrs. Eisenberg at ChicagoJewishFunerals.com or Legacy.com. This does conclude the service. Thank you.